I'll start off with saying this. Do you believe that kids are, I don't want to say softer, but you have to change the way you coach or the way you were taught by Huggins to coach to the kids today?
It sounds like I'm an old man saying, well, kids today, but in reference to your question, times are different. But I also think, and this will sound maybe sacrilegious to some, I don't think that parents have to go to every activity that their kid is a part of. You know, their kids are going to be involved, but if they become so dependent, looking in the stands, where's my mom? Where's my dad? You know, the ultimate goal for kids when they get out of school is to become independent.
Yeah.
And if they're dependent forever, it's pretty tough to shake that.
Welcome to me casa, make yourself at home, do your do. Welcome to my pad, this your lab, go create your move. I got a crib by the water, say me casa, su casa. It feels like Casablanca. Shawty, you my little mama. I got a crib.
What's good, everybody? It's 99 miles per hour with Percy Garner, and today we have a special guest. And I appreciate everyone stopping by. If you're new here, make sure you click and like and subscribe. And, we got content, we got pitching tips, but we're going to be focusing a lot on a podcast again and getting some more guests up here. So I'm very excited about today. As you can see, I got this book held up. I got a long-time mentor for me, coach, teacher, never had in my class, which I'm glad. We'll figure out some stuff about that later. But new book. I think you should get it. We'll put links down in the description if you're wanting to purchase the book, whether that's Kindle edition or if you like the tangible book like most readers do. Also, we are looking for sponsors. We finally have, we're boosting up. Should I tell them, Josh? We got some surprises coming up. We may be doing some other things with the podcast here shortly. So looking forward to that. But today, we have someone that, like I said, I've admired for a long time, and obviously has writing skills that I do not have. And a lot of people I admire who have skills and talents that I don't have, and maybe not saying I'm jealous, but a lot of athletes always like to sing. I can't sing, and vice versa, which I don't think my guest today can sing. But without further ado, teacher, coach, educator, writer, all of the above. Today we have Mike Gunther. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Perce. I chuckled when you were saying a long-time association. I remember when you used to come to basketball camp when your head was shaved and you were running around, man, just full of energy. Yeah. And full of skill, but it wasn't fully developed at that point.
Oh, I like how you put that. I appreciate it. Full of skill, but not developed. I liked it. Basketball, actually, I don't know if I ever told you this, but basketball was my favorite sport. That was my mom's main sport. And my dad, I always heard stories about him being great at basketball. But I had to work a lot harder at basketball to be at a same level as I was on baseball and football. So sure. I let other people, take the front seat in basketball. So
well, you had the advantage. You had that big hind end by the time you were in high school, and you were great at checking and rebounding and doing your role.
Yeah,
you were a pleasure to coach.
Well, I appreciate that, and I always tell people I was really good at rebounding and setting picks. So I didn't have the big responsibility of having to score and have the pressure to make the ball go in the hole. But I could grab the ball off the boards and find the open man. So luckily we had people that could do all the other stuff and great coaching. So, we'll get into that because, you were an amazing coach. And then we'll also talk about why, that you kind of inspired and to get in the coaching career. And, we got a lot of stuff we're going to talk about, but we want to start off talking about the book, Views from the Hot Seat. Again, Views from the Hot Seat. If you want to purchase it, it'll be down links in the description. And I read this while I was on vacation. Still not completely finished, I'll admit. But there's a lot of things that I was just like, oh, crap, I know I got about 45 minutes. What I want to focus on. But I guess we're just going to start off the basic question of why this book, why write this now? now that you're retired, not educating as much now, because I feel like you're at a different level now, which we can touch on a little bit too. But just why Views from the Hot Seat?
When I retired, one of the big challenges when a person retires is, what are you going to do now? When I retired, I didn't know whether I was ready to go or not, but because of changes in the state teachers retirement system, I was going to make as much money in my retirement at that moment as I ever would. So from a financial standpoint, it made sense for me to retire. So I did, and then I taught part-time for 9 years at Walsh University as an adjunct professor of English, which I thoroughly enjoyed as well. But what had happened was I was trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. And I knew there were things that I was good at, I felt I was, and one of them was teaching. So I really didn't want to get out of education from that perspective, with the exception of I had this opportunity to go to Walsh. And that came as like within a week after I had retired. And I thought I always wanted to teach at the college level, so this is my opportunity. And I relished that. It was a great deal of fun. So I did that. But in the meantime, I started writing a blog. And in writing my blog, I was a bit apprehensive at first, because anytime you expose your thinking, you run the risk of being criticized, challenged, and so on. And I became comfortable when doing that. And the more I did it, the more I got into what I was doing. But I didn't write like on a schedule. I kind of wrote when something moved me, I would get involved in that. So that's really what I did. So for 9 years, I wrote blogs. And finally I decided, and this may sound like I'm getting older, those kind of deals. But we have 3 grandchildren now, my wife and I. Yeah. And the realistic side of it is they're infants now. By the time they graduate from high school, I'll probably be about 85, 86, 87 through there. And I wanted them to know who I was, and by then I may not be there. Yeah. But regardless, my words will live on. So that was really a big motivator for me, was for my grandkids.
That's dope. I like that. I appreciate that. And, I never really thought about, writing out my thoughts. And I know there's, I'm a big technology guy, and there's a new feature coming out with the new software for the iPhone, and it's going to be called journaling. But, you can do more than just write. You can have photos and stuff. And I'm very excited about that feature to possibly do that. And now, obviously, I don't plan on leaving this earth for another 35 plus years, but you never know what can happen. So I've always started this big old kind of server of all the photos I've ever had in my life. So I've got about 30 terabytes of storage, and I'm hoping 80 years of photos can fit in there. Yeah, we'll see. I might have to add stuff to it, but obviously I think there's something else down the road, and I feel like it's an educational piece too for grandchildren. It's because I know I read books to my kids, and it'd be nice to just have something like that where, like, hey, this is, sure. This is your grandpa wrote this, and this is, or your great grandpa, or so on and so forth. So I think that's dope. That's dope. That's super cool. And, obviously we're going to dive more into this book. And like I said on the phone, I'm like, I feel like there's so much, even outside of sports, that I wanted to cover, and I'm glad you wrote about in this book, that we might have to, have you bless us with your presence again at a later date. But before we dive into the book and Views from the Hot Seat, there's something going on right now. It's kind of, big if you're into sports, and obviously you were a basketball coach for 100 years. So what's your take, your opinion? First of all, are you enjoying these NBA finals?
I am. Okay. I am. I unfortunately, because they start so late, I usually make it till halftime, and then I fade and watch the highlights the next day.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. It's nice when they, I guess, play in Miami eventually, but I was really like, oh no, if we get, it's always nice that they do East and West Coast, but I'm enjoying it not being the same teams. I am too. That kind of gets, but I'm like, I'm hesitant just because I didn't really gravitate towards Tim Duncan because he wasn't really exciting. He was, obviously his nickname was Big Fundamentals. But I'm looking at Jokic and just the way he plays the game, and obviously he's polar opposite of LeBron as in physicality wise. But you know, they like to get their team involved, and when I look back on my career, I'm always like, I wish, you know, I could have been more of a facilitator and more of a ball handler, but I remember how difficult that is. And I don't think people understand the responsibility of handling the ball until you go and watch a freshman team or someone younger and they struggle to get the ball up the court, and that's why teams press. And then it hits me like, wow, like I took that for granted, having people like handle the ball. To be a 7-footer, still handle the ball, be able to facilitate, be able to score. Like, I just want to hear, I guess, your opinion on Jokic as a player.
I think he's an absolutely tremendous player. He's steps out of the mold, but today's centers, is particularly in the NBA, the old school center of go down, post low, and we'll throw the ball into you. That's, as we know, that's dead. Yeah. You know, I've always been a big fan of Joel Embiid. My daughter worked for the 76ers for 8 years, so I got to see several of their games, and he is a phenomenal player, but he's hurt. He gets hurt. And the Joker, he just keeps playing. He just keeps playing. I think he's a tremendous player. And the fact that his demeanor doesn't change much, as to someone who has ever coached before, that's what you want. I mean, you want somebody who just comes in and works, is good, and plays the game, I guess the old cliche, the way it's intended to be played. Yeah. And so I have great admiration for him.
That's what's up. Well, so I don't know if there's people out there that have never played basketball in like an organized setting. But if you've played any pickup basketball, you know how physical basketball is. You know how, like, I would say I'm an easygoing person for the most part, and you've been around me for virtually my whole life. Basketball just is different. It just brings anger out of me. And I feel like you see a lot of people wanting foul calls and all that, and we're not going to get into referees, but I say all that to say, to kind of get back to your demeanor. Like, I'm sure there's been bigger, stronger people trying to like get him out of his rhythm and all that. And I just want to touch on, like, it's not easy to keep a even keel in basketball. But I just want to say that because I would, yell at refs a lot and get out of character, and a lot of people don't see me do that. So, but yeah, Jokic, awesome. NBA Finals, fun to watch. It's not the Warriors. It's not the same teams every time. So that's good. But, and I kind of want to, leeway into coaching and just talk about, certain sports have, we'll say coaches in certain sports get more, I guess, notoriety or credit for wins than other ones. I think managers in baseball are a little bit, I guess, undersold. People in Cleveland think of Tito highly, but I think in general in baseball, the manager doesn't really get as much credit. And the same, for especially in the NBA, college different, coaches, in high school, but in the NBA, I feel that coaching doesn't really get, it's so easy to criticize. And that's kind of, I want to go into this. NBA is not the only place that people criticize coaches or refs for that matter. And now that I'm out, I'm avoiding coaching at all costs. But I did coach basketball, but it's really young. So it's just really hard to get mad at me. I just want to kind of talk about how you dealt with that, especially, in this area where sports is very important, probably to a lot of school districts, but to Tuscarawas County, sports is huge. And to be at some programs that sports means a lot to, and you being a basketball coach, that you're not one of those that's going to bite your tongue and let stuff happen. You're going to let the player know where they messed up. And, some parents, don't like that. Some players don't like that, and they're going to complain. But just share your thoughts, especially, what you wrote about in the book, how criticism and all that stuff plays into coaching, and kind of give us a vantage point that a lot of people don't think about when they're so biased because their kids are involved.
Well, I can answer that rather simply. It might take me a little bit to get the full effect of it, but the best thing I did when I was in college, I became a basketball referee. I got my license, and I began working. At that time, they were called junior high games, and both boys and girls. Girls basketball was sort of in its infancy, and so I worked a lot of boys and girls junior high basketball games. I worked freshman boys games, and I worked JV. And one of the things that I did, I went to Kent State University. The Portage County League Officials Association, which I joined, they had a unique way of dealing with young referees. They would assign, for a varsity and reserve game, they would assign 3 officials, the 2 varsity and 1 JV. Each varsity guy was responsible for bringing along a JV guy. And then each varsity guy would work a half with the JV guy during the JV game. Mm-hmm. So I became exposed to top-notch officiating coming out of the gate. And I had guys explaining to me the game, explaining to me what to look for, what not to look for, what to ignore, and so on. But most importantly, through that whole thing, I developed thick skin. And that was important. That was really important. And you have to understand, this will sound strange too, but at that time I had some long hair going, you know. And at one point I even had a beard going with it too. But the beard didn't last long, but the hair did. So, of course, during that time, we were getting yelled at, the hippies and blah, 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 blah. But I learned that. I mean, I learned that if you're going to be in this game, you got to focus on the task at hand and try to block out everything you can. That was very important to me. And also, when I was in college, when I did my student teaching, I did it at Streetsboro High School. And I went to the head coach, and I said, look, I really would like to start coaching and helping with you, you know. And he was a little suspect, you know, I was a young guy, blah, blah, blah. So I started coming to all the practices and working with him, and I realized, good heavens, these guys are terrible. I mean, it was, I really was shocked. And what was most interesting is that as soon as the head coach accepted that I had been trained by Charlie Huggins, my credibility suddenly went up. And he started listening. And at one point, he told his JV coach not to come to the Friday night and Saturday night games because I was going to coach him. So I still remember it. And I'm thinking, because he came to me after Thursday's practice and said, these kids are yours. And I said, how about Ken? What's going on with Ken? And he said, I sent him away. He's not going to be here for 2 days. So, okay, so suddenly I'm thrust into coaching. But my point is that was very important for me. Someone understood that I was pretty well prepared, and any of us who came through the program at Indian Valley South, we were very well prepared. But I didn't know it until I started having to apply it. Because I remember talking to the coach, and he said, what was that defense you guys played a lot? And I said, well, we played man most of the time, but we played a lot of matchup. And he said, tell me about this matchup. So I started explaining it to him, and I realized here's a guy who was a head coach who had no concept of what this was. Wow. But I had already been doing it for 3 years as a player, as well as anybody I played with. So I don't want it to sound arrogant because I'm referring to the preparation that I received from Coach Huggins. Yeah. He had us so well prepared, and many of us, when we graduated from college, we went into education and became coaches.
Gotcha.
So when you watch Bobby, you know, he's the same product of the same tree, you know.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. And we're going to get a little bit into, you know, Charlie, because you've got a chapter per se, you know, dedicated to him and what he taught you, and, you know, a lot of things. Sure. And I love that too. So I want to really get on that. But I want to talk about young athletes. And I know I'm an athlete who played 3 sports while I was in high school, and I want to refrain from saying all sports because there's other sports than football, baseball, and basketball. Sure. My son loves soccer, so I'm getting on the soccer bandwagon.
Good.
But there's a lot of stuff going on, and you being a coach and coaching, you know, in different eras, and, you know, being responsible for kids that are growing up in different times, and obviously I know I was different than the kids in the 80s. And so on and so forth. How is it that, you know, I'll start off with saying this. Do you believe that kids are, I don't want to say softer, but you have to change the way you coach or the way you were taught by Huggins to coach to the kids today?
I do.
Okay.
I do. And it's, when you deal with kids, you have to identify what kind of kid you're dealing with here. Okay. Are you dealing with a kid that you can just drive, or are you dealing with a kid who's really soft, and you've got to make him tougher, or that's just the way that he is, or are you dealing with a kid who is going to accept all the coaching, never change demeanor, and just, sort of make his presence felt in any way that he can. But kids today, and this, I hesitate to go off on this because I don't want to go off on it, but it sounds like I'm an old man saying, well, kids today, but in reference to your question, times are different. But I also think, and this will sound maybe sacrilegious to some, I don't think that parents have to go to every activity that their kid is a part of. It's their kids are going to be involved, but if they become so dependent, looking in the stands, where's my mom? Where's my dad? Where, the ultimate goal for kids when they get out of school is to become independent. Yeah. And if they're dependent forever, it's pretty tough to shake that. But do I think kids are softer? Back to your original question. I'm not going to say softer. I'm going to say that our society and the fine line that you have to walk, because parents will jump all over you. Yeah. If they see you yelling at your kid, and as a coach, I was never hesitant about getting on kids, as you mentioned, because kids knew I liked them. Kids knew that I cared for them. I had them in class and so on. But at the same time, you don't become better if you're allowed to get away with cutting corners. Yeah. And most of the great coaches that I have been around, and had the good fortune to be around a lot of them, they drive their kids. But yet they also know when it's time to put your arm around them and you talk with them and go from there. So let's don't beat up on the kids today, and let's don't beat up on the parents. Let's accept the times have changed, but also let's understand that we need kids to learn how to be independent. And sometimes doing that means mom and dad are not in the stands watching. Yeah. So just, a personal thing on my part, but I firmly believe that.
I would say I largely agree as well. And you even shared moments with me, and Coach If did, because I would say, Bobby, Coach Bob Von Kennel was, he would get on, on you a lot if you weren't showing effort, mainly. He's not going to get on you because you missed a shot. No. like, come on. But the thing I realized is my dad was the same way. I just kind of grew up with that, and I expected that. And if I didn't get, if someone let me, an adult or coach or teacher let me get away with something, I was just like, and I just expected that type of, I want to call it, I guess, criticism, if I needed it. And I think I did not progress well if I didn't have that. And I'm sure there's, like you said, there's different kids. Sure. But I wanted to hear your perspective on that. To
just sort of go a step further with that. Certain things that I always held in great regard with kids when I coached them. Number one, I wanted effort. I mean, every coach does. I wanted kids to just hang it out there, play hard, and when they couldn't go, then we get them out and put somebody else in for a little bit. That was always a very big thing to me. I wanted them to be able to participate in the team structure, distributing the ball, doing a variety of things. And third, and equally important, I did not want them to look in the stands for their parents, because I thought, no, this is my classroom right here. And I'm the one you're listening to at that point, or Coach Von Kennel or whoever else was our assistant. And we didn't have that problem very often, but the kids were, kids in Dover were, and other places I coached too, were very malleable. I mean, they wanted to learn and they wanted to win. And that's such a big thing, is this winning can, I don't want to say it cures all ills, but boy, it helps. I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, for sure. And, a lot of people get used to that, and you kind of expect it, and that's not bad. It's just, sometimes we forget how difficult it is to keep, especially with, the divisions we're in and the competition we're facing, it gets difficult. And with all that being said as well, I kind of want to go into, a part of the book that doesn't necessarily, hammer, the sports point home, but I think it has a lot of, ramifications, similar ramifications as you just talked about with students looking up in the stands. I was never one that would do something bad or do something and look for my parents' approval because, my dad wasn't that type of, he would get on me at home, but he was not yelling from the stands. He wouldn't be yelling at coaches and he was a ref as well. So he definitely didn't yell at refs. So, I got a slightly different, perspective on that outlook. But the educational thing, and I agree strongly because that's all I was obsessed with was, in the educational system was making sure I got good grades. And when I got bad test scores, it really messed with me mentally. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get into any college. And it weighed on me. And I was one of those that every time I got a grade back, I was calculating my GPA because I knew that my dad if he was tough on me in anything, it was making sure my report card and my grades were good. And that kind of goes to your point. In the book, you talked about, I feel like our society is more about getting good grades than learning. Yep. And correct me if I mischaracterize that, but is that correct?
I firmly believe that. And I've felt that way for a long time, but it wasn't until I got to college level and teaching kids when I realized the mistake that an awful lot of kids make in doing just what you said. I'll give you a perfect example. When I was teaching at Walsh, I taught freshman English, and the greatest majority of the kids I had were, they did not take an AP curriculum. Many of them did not take a college prep curriculum. They just took regular English. Okay. And they would come into my classroom, and Josh, or certainly you can attest to this, but many of them were writing at about the level of kids I had in freshman or sophomore English in high school. And when I would ask them about their writing, what did you do in high school? Tell me what you did, blah, blah, blah. Well, the greatest majority of them, believe it or not, said, well, we didn't write very much, and my inner reaction is, well, no kidding, I can see that. But what was happening is that most of them said they got A's or B's in high school English. Well, I had an awful lot of kids that were C's and D's, and some below that because the writing skills were horrendous. Some, don't misunderstand me. The good ones were really stood out from everybody else. Yeah. But my point is just that when a kid is involved in an educational situation, and I realize so much of it has to deal with maturity, but it's more about getting grades than it is about getting an education. But when you start paying for it, it becomes a little different ballgame.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it.
Well, I have an example with that as well. Obviously I was paying for my own college because I was not smart and I didn't take any full rides.
Oh, you were smart. You were smart.
Well, in my decision making, I felt like my dad was alive. As soon as I got that first scholarship offer, he was like, all right, we're signing. But I ended up, going to school and luckily I was drafted and was able to pay off my student loans immediately. But I realized the difference between my 18 to 21 college years till my 31 to 33 college years, where I was just trying to get by and make sure that to society and to public eyes that these were my grades and they were good. And then later, it's just different. I've read more books from the age 25 to now than and I was in school, and I would admit I didn't have your class, but there were some resources that you could use to get by without reading to complete the class. I used them, and because I was I took AP, calculus. I was math science. I didn't ask to be an honors language artist, but they put me in those. But for me, learning and getting an education is just the hunger. I feel like I wish there was a way we can reverse it. So where obviously there's a point where you're a sponge. I don't know what, when you're first born all the way up until 6, 7, 8. I don't know what that age is, but then there's a point, teenage years, where you're just like, I just want to do what I want to do. Sure. And then, like I said, when I got my diploma and I got my degree from Northeastern in Boston, which I had a plan to walk over to Harvard and take a picture like I graduated from there. It's red, it's a different tint, but it's all for,
Sure.
others. It's not for like, hey, I accomplished this, or hey, I learned this when I was in school. And I want to kind of get back to the point of, and I'm not asking you to bash parents, but it's just, I think nowadays I feel like I'm going to be more of an old school parent and kind of replicate what my dad did. He expected me to have good grades, but he was never going to go in and vouch for me and say, hey, my kid should have this grade, or just make an excuse for me.
Sure.
And I just feel like it's a different time. And did you have any experiences like firsthand with maybe a parent, or there being some altercation about a kid's grade or something like that?
Every now and then.
Every now and then.
Every now and then you run into that. But the people who were most worrisome, and I don't mean worrisome to me, but were worrisome in regard to raising their child, were the ones who were grade obsessed. Their kids had to have an A.
Gotcha.
They had to have an A. And typically when I would deal with them in conferences, I'd try to talk them off the ledge a little bit, because it was like there are more important things. That might be me then. I
don't know. I might fit
more
this
important things. I can only share this with you, Percy, although my wife and my 2 children were not aware of, it wasn't like we sat down and had all these conversations. Yeah. But we were both on the same page that we were more interested in our children being well adjusted than we were them being 4-point students. We wanted them to understand, you got to learn how to get along with people. You got to learn how to compromise. You got to learn how to understand other people, that not everybody is the same. We're all wired differently, that kind of thing. Now, did we make mistakes along the way? Well, my heavens, yes. Anytime you're a parent, you fly by the seat of your pants and hope you do something right along the way.
Yes.
But because of the fact that we were raising our own 2 children, we learned a lot from each other. I was kind of the psycho dad from time to time, and my wife was the one who was able to rein things in.
Yeah.
So I think I learned more from those situations than I did anything else.
Okay. And you talk about your wife, sometimes, and I feel like we share that as well. There's certain things that can have me trip or get over excited about certain things. But, and I know we've touched on coaching and education, and being a coach and a teacher. There's I equate it similar to being like an athlete, because there's certain expectations that you're held to. Now, obviously, your pay isn't next to an athlete, but which is a whole nother topic. But we're not going to get into that today. I think we all have people. And we give credit to certain people who have allowed us to be great at what we're doing. And you mentioned your wife, and I want to talk about role models, and you talk about your wife a lot, and you guys just parenting, and but I want to kind of, because we talked about this a little bit, and you talk about it in your book as well. Women in our society and how things have progressed, and what things used to look like for your mom, where your dad she had to be by his side, which I admire. It made me kind of think like, dang, why do I want to be away from my wife so much?
Might want to edit that part.
Yeah, we're gonna take that out. But like we're like women, there are certain women that you admire, and I want to see if it's similar reasons to why I admire those same women. Not your wife as much, but I know there might be some other women that you bring up. But because I want to get to Charlie Huggins too, but let's talk about, because I said I want to have more women on the show, but we don't have any here today. But we can talk about them in a positive light. So the women in your life, how did they mold you? How did they encourage you? And how did they impress you and kind of change your life or guide your life in a certain way?
Well, obviously my mother was a big role, but it's funny as I look back, both she and my dad are gone now, but I never remember being mad at my mom, nor do I ever remember catching the devil from my mom. My dad, he was sort of the one that ruled the roost. And but I learned as much from both of them, but I was probably closer in an emotional sort of way to my mother. So, she played a distinct role. And I had a sister, of course, who, she was the straight A's and I was not. We'll just leave it at that. She was the well-behaved one, and again, I was not.
Yes.
One of those deals. But professionally, there really are three women that have played significant roles in my life. One was Dr. Montefiore, who was here at Dover. She was a very strong woman, but she was also the kind of woman that said, look, you do your job, you never have a problem with me. But if you are going to start cutting kids short, and just to make your life a little easier, now you're going to have a problem with it. And I admired the fact that she could play with the boys' club. I mean, she wasn't afraid or intimidated. And then Carrie McCray, the current superintendent at Dover, when we hired her way back, we hired her, out of college. And I was, on the interview team, interviewed her and all that stuff, as I was with Dr. Fair. But Carrie she was so good because there was something about her that told me this girl's got a picture. Being a high school English teacher is not going to be her, end game. There was a lot more to her. But she was the same way. I watched her grow in her profession, and I watched her develop into a true professional educator who was she's very well read, and she knew how to keep her thumb on things, put it that way. And then the third one, of course, is my wife. I watched my wife start from the beginning, the bottom of the nursing profession and work her way up to the president of Altman Hospital today. But she has paid her dues. Yeah. And the thing I'm saying when I mention about her and Carrie and Dr. Fair, they all paid their dues. I watched my wife, earn her doctorate after going to school for year after year after year after year, and finally achieve that dream. And my point, I think, has been made that there are women who I admire who are driven, and at the same time, we all know that males, we have a little big ego, from time to time, and we do need people to keep us in line.
Yes.
And we never like to admit it, but as I've gotten a little bit older, I've realized, I need people to keep me between the guardrails, as they say.
Yeah. And I heard a speech from a basketball coach and athletic director in Holmes County. And I think he has a podcast as well, but I heard him speak, and he talked about blind spots. Mm-hmm. And I kind of equate that to keeping in line, because there's certain things we can't see everything. Mm-hmm. And the wife, mother, or someone that professionally that is maybe your superior or not, but just can see the blind spots. You have that type of relationship where she can say, "Hey, so and so, you're kind of wrong here," or "Hey, you're missing this." Yep. And I think that's very important to know where, people say know thyself, but know where those blind spots are, and then, know to, when my wife points them out, I let her know. I'm like, hey, when we're in we're making good conversation and communication is good, I let her know, hey, when we do have our bad moments, it's because my ego at the time, I want to be right, but an hour later, I'll do exactly what you said, because I know it's right. But at the time, I'm like,
Sure. And we know as well that the hardest person to understand is ourselves. It's not somebody else. It's us, because we see what we think is there. We don't necessarily see what others see when they are checking us out. So anyway, I think that's an important little life lesson along the way.
Yeah, and I talked about this on the podcast before, but when I was getting ready for my wedding, and I was about to perform a song at my wedding, until I recorded myself and really heard and saw what it looked and sounded like. And I said, okay, no, I am not. But in your mind, when it's happening and you have someone singing along with you who actually can sing, it sounds a little different. So now I see what everybody else sees.
So you were not Smokey Robinson, is that what you're saying? Okay.
Was not. And I did not sing at my wedding, which is a good thing. But there's some other things that we're probably going to have to push to the next episode. But I want to hear, because I have a lot of people that I look up to as mentors. I don't really think I have one person that I'm like, above all, this person, besides God, is the one person that molded my life. But, you have a chapter in your book that's dedicated to Charlie Huggins. And I just kind of want to hear you verbalize a lot of the stuff, or vocalize a lot of the stuff that you have in this book just about Charlie, because I feel like I share a lot of the sentiments about coaches I've had in the past. And I always hear these horror stories from teammates, both other high school players I talk to, other college level players, and professional level players. And sometimes I take it with a grain of salt. Like, I think they're bitter about certain situations, which I am as well. You know, I feel like I should have been able to shoot more, but there's a reality to it as well. And I just felt like I was blessed with coaches, great coaches, all the way up through the ranks. And I'm assuming that's rare because of the stories I hear. But, you know, just talk about the role that Charlie Huggins played in your life and kind of help mold you. You know, obviously you had the women in your life that made a big impact, but Charlie, you know, obviously basketball and coaching.
You know, when he came to Indian Valley South, I was a sophomore, and he gathered us in the gymnasium. It was a real small gym, and we were seated there on the bleachers, and he started telling us how we were going to get to the state tournament and win the state championship. We had never even thought about that. I mean, that was just not. We were just a 500 or below group of kids. That was nothing on our radar. So the very first thing he did was he gave us a goal. That was very important. And before long, we started believing that maybe that's something we could do. And of course, part of it was at that time, we were just young kids. And when Bobby came in, the world changed, you know, because Bobby was a tremendous player and had two other kids who moved in from Indian Valley North who had moved in somewhere through middle school and in a freshman year of high school. And they made a tremendous difference. So all of a sudden, we went from being average to being pretty good, really good. And by the time we were done, within 2 years, we were state champions.
Wow.
And in 3 years, we were state runners-up before my senior year we graduated. When we graduated, we lost the state championship game in the fourth quarter, 42-37. Just like, we never forget that. But but anyway,
of course
but
not.
that's how that was. But he instilled discipline in us. There was a trust there. There was a credibility to him. He had won a state championship at Strasburg in '67. He was, among coaching gurus, he was the man. And he drove us, put limitations on us. We had to go to camp out at Eastern Ohio Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday nights and play in a 3-man league. We didn't really have a choice. I mean, it was what we were going to do. And at that time, not many of us were driving. Somebody would. We'd load up in the back of a pickup truck and lay down on the floor and ride to Sherridsville and hope we didn't get picked up by a state highway patrol. And then we would play basketball till dark, and then we'd come home. And next week, repeat the same thing. When we used to go to basketball camp out there, the first year he had camp was when I was in between my sophomore and junior year. And we went there. We would go on Sunday afternoon, and we'd be dismissed on, I think it was either late Friday night or Saturday morning. And there, of course, there was nothing to do except play basketball. Yeah. I mean, that was it. So my point is, we learned to sacrifice. We learned dedication. We learned discipline, and we learned to be goal-oriented. All those things were things that we wanted, and we wanted to win. We came together, and I've oftentimes thought he adopted the approach that Billy Martin took when he was a manager with the Yankees and everybody in Oakland and so on. He wanted players to hate him, but not each other. So to have someone to direct your anger at, a common opponent, and I think he thrived in that, because each one of us at various points just hated him and just wanted to quit and walk out of there, including, you know, Bobby, Harry, Larry, all his sons. We all wanted to. I mean, there's no hiding that. But he had the one thing, and there were a lot of guys that had quit and wished they never had. But he knew we wanted to win more than anything else. And it became that way when I continued coaching. I mean, it all became, okay, it's nice to do this and that. How'd you do? What was the score? Did we win?
Yeah.
You know, and not that was the be all and end all, but that was the goal. And he shaped me tremendously, but in truth, I don't know if I fully appreciated it until later in life. And I had a moment with him out of camp. I described it in the book where he congratulated me on my success as a coach and so on. And I thanked him. And when I drove home, I had tears in my eyes because it was a moment I'd been waiting for my whole life to hear his approval. Mm-hmm. And when I got it, I thought, wow, you know, it was big. It was big.
That's what's up. Mm-hmm. And it is different when you hear, you know, the approval of someone that you really deeply respect. Sure. and has made an impact on your life. So that's a dope story. And, you know, I obviously wanted to cover that. Now we got some other things that I wanted to get to, but we'll have to postpone those until the next time we have Coach Gunther on. You know, and we're going to talk maybe about Pro Football Hall of Fame and, you know, and I like picking your brain more about basketball because I still love the sport. You know, like I said, just wasn't as good, but, but no, I appreciate you coming on the show. Again, guys, check this book out. Like I said, we'll put links in the description. This is definitely something that's going to stay in my rotation, along with some, what was that author Damon, the Energy Bus. Do you know that? Damon West. So I have a couple of his books in rotation too. So I really enjoyed this, and I've never read a book of this format too. So I think the format makes it more enticing. And when I find something I want to read, I want to keep doing it. But I'm like, you know, maybe I'll leave some for a different time. Sure. But again, thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And you know,
appreciate it.
Yeah,
appreciate the opportunity.
Well, like I said, we'll have you back. I'll be in touch. And is that correct, Josh? Where you said was it his class was your favorite, or was he your favorite teacher? Oh, okay. Well, look at that.
Thanks, Josh.
Wow. Math is the best. So I would have to say.
Well, we were all wired a little differently. Josh was wired kind of like me.
Yeah.
A lot, and you were wired. You weren't an English guy.
No,
you were the math tech guy, and understanding that is very important. You know?
Yeah. But I've there's things that you do later in life where you're like, I kind of wish I would have, you know, maybe developed the skill a little bit more, just because I thought technology and stuff would get away from writing, but no, no it's always going to be there, and having that skill is good. So I'm going to continue to work at it, and I've even got a fake pencil where I write on my iPad. So, but anyways, again, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you for being here. Appreciate you, Josh, and I can't wait till they see the things that are changing. And I thank you viewers for tuning in. I appreciate you guys. Again, make sure you like and subscribe. We're trying to get to that number of 1,000. We still haven't hit the halfway mark, but I still believe. I just have to, you know, be more consistent and get the content out to you guys. But we'll keep it coming. But again, everything you're going to need to know is down in the description. Check it out. Also, check out the website, percygarner.com. If you want to get in contact with me or see anything that I'm doing in my community, or, you know, because I try to make a difference where I can as well. So I appreciate you guys for listening. Again, we'll see you in the next episode. Peace.
I got a crib by the water. Say me casa, su casa. It feels like Casablanca. Shawty, you my little mama. I got a crib by the water. Say me casa, su casa. It feels like Casablanca. Shawty, you my little mama. She be on that Henny. I like that Corona. I love her smell.